Hey guys, welcome back to your Unit 2 Lesson 3 notes on dividing rational numbers. So please keep your undivided attention on this video. Ha ha ha. We'll first review by doing a quick division review, and then you will go over some definitions about inverses, and then we'll do some dividing, and then we'll put it into practice, and it'll be all great fun. Okay, here we go. First, go ahead and complete this warm-up using your division skills. Pause the video and find each quotient. Here we go. Negative 2.1 rather, divided by 7. First I'm going to note this is going to be negative eventually, so I'm just going to say equals something negative. Okay. And then I'll do 2.1, I'm thinking faster than I'm writing, 2.1 divided by 7. Now you see where this decimal point is? That decimal point needs to go right up there. I should do this a different color. That decimal point needs to go right up here. Make sure they align. Now 7 goes into 2 0 times, but 7 goes into 21 3 times. And subtract, that comes out 0. That was super nice. So our final answer is negative 0.3. Now in B, we'll do the same kind of thing. This is going to be positive because both numbers are positive. So we have 4.5 divided by 0.9. Now, because we have a decimal point here, we need to move the decimal point over 1 so that we can do our dividing. So we're going to move him to the right 1. That also means that we're going to move this other decimal point to the right 1. So our final decimal point will be up here. Okay, 9 goes into 4 0 times, but 9 goes into 45 exactly 5 times. Man, who designed these problems? That's so great. Awesome. So 4.5 divided by 0.9 or 0.9 is exactly 5. Way to go. Okay, over here at C, we have one negative sign right here, which means our quotient is going to be negative. Cool. And we've got 6 divided by 0.5. We have a decimal point here, so we need to move him over. We're going to eventually move that decimal point too. We need to move him over to the right 1, so move this decimal point over to the right 1 and put a little pretend 0 there. Cool. So our decimal point will go up here. Right? So 5 goes into 6 one time. Awesome. Which is 5. Minus that, get a 1, bring your 0 down. And then 5 goes into 10 2 times to be an even 10. No pun intended. And that's it, we're done. So our final answer is negative 12. And for D, we have 2 negatives going on right here. And 2 negatives, negative divided by negative, makes a positive. So there will be nothing there. Or you can pretend like, oh yeah, okay, cool, positive, nice. Let's do some division. We got 7.4 divided by 2. And then looking at where our decimal point is, that needs to stay right there. 2 goes into 7 3 times to give us a 6. Minusing gives us a 1, bringing down our 4. 2 goes into 14 7 times for an even 14. And we're all set. Our final answer is 3.7. Awesome. So your goal for the day is by the end of the lesson, you will be able to divide rational numbers, which you did. We're just going to get more in depth. So I'm going to be using this term called reciprocal. Remember when you reciprocate something is when you do something back for someone that they already did for you? Oh, reciprocal. Similarly in math, a reciprocal is one that, so when you reciprocate something for someone, like if I bring you to school and then you bring me to school on another day. Like, we're even carpool buddies. We make it even. We cancel each other out. We don't owe any dates, anything. To reciprocate is, yes, settle the score. You don't owe each other anything after you reciprocate an action. Okay. So when we have two numbers, like m and m, you have m times n equals 1. We say they're reciprocals. Because we're multiplying here, and because they kind of undo each other, we also call them multiplicative, like multiplication, inverses for undoing each other. But you guys, that's so hard. So let's just stick with reciprocal. Okay. Also, this should be plural. They are reciprocals. For example, if you have 1/2 times 2, that's equal to 1. So 1/2 and 2, they are reciprocals. Right? Or if you have like -7/6 and -6/7, those are going to multiply to 1 because they're like each other flipped around, and they'll cancel each other out. Okay. Reciprocals, you guys, are any numbers that look like a over b and b over a. Basically, how do you find a reciprocal? You flip it. If you have a number that just looks like n, for example, its reciprocal is 1 over n. So think of numbers like this when you think of reciprocals. You just flip it upside down. Now, the multiplicative inverse property goes with the definition of multiplicative inverses. And it says, hey, the product, which is timesing, of a number and its multiplicative inverse is 1. Ta-da! That means if you have some number, a over b, and then you have b over a, you flip it. A over b times b over a is 1. Ta-da! Now, why does that work, Miss Van Dyke? I know you're asking. Well, I will show you right now. Let's say you have a over b times b over a. Well, we'll multiply across. That gives us ab over ba. And then we are allowed to reorder these two guys. So that's a over b over, a times b over a times b. And well, now we've got a lot of reduction that can be happening. The b's reduce, the a's reduce, and you guys, it's 1. Ta-da! Okay, now here's your fun fact of the day. Dividing by a number is the same thing as multiplying by its reciprocal. And what that means is if you have like 4 divided by 6, that's the same thing as 4 times 1/6. Because 4/6 is 4/6. Ta-da! Proof by grammar. That's not a thing. Don't do that. Alright, so how do you divide a fraction? Well, you just multiply by the reciprocal. So what does that mean? You take this number here, if you want to divide by c over d, first you flip it, and then you multiply. So what do we do here? 1, you flip it, and then 2, you multiply. That's it. That's our key idea of the day. Flip it and multiply. So take this idea, copy it to every problem that you see of division. Flip it and multiply. Flip it and multiply. Flip it and multiply. Okay. Ready? Too far. Here we go. Okay. Are we going to divide by 4? Well, that's tricky. So we have 3/5. First, let's flip it. So instead of -4 over 1, that's -1 over 4. We flip it. We change this dividey guy to a timesy guy. We multiply. Boom. And now we can do the pretty straightforward multiply across. giving us 3 times 1 over 5 times 4, which is 3 over 20. All set. Oh, shoot. What did I do wrong? I made an error. I forgot the negative sign. Oh no, negative sign. So it's negative 320. Ta-da! Alright, let's do another one. Flip and multiply. Guys, don't flip out, but yes, flip out. Because it's multiply, it's dividing by fractions. Okay, so 6/5. Flip the fraction is 10/3. And then flip your sign, as in change it to a multiply. Okay, let's multiply across. 6 times 10 is 60. Awesome. 5 times 3 is 15. Awesome. That can reduce because 60 is in fact divisible by 15. We can take a 15 out of them and get a 4 over 1. So our final answer is a plain old 4. So how great was that? Okay, cool. I know that's great, but when are we going to need this in real life, they say? Well, let's say that you're making cookies. In fact, Miss Young is making cookies for her 3rd period class. How much sugar does she need? Except, guys, she has a very small 3rd period class, so she only needs 1 dozen cookies. However, look at this amazing recipe that for realsies exists. It makes 2 dozen cookies. So we need to divide by 2. Okay, first, what do we need? Sugar. We're looking at sugar. How much sugar does she need? And this calls for 2/3 of a cup. So what we'll do is we'll take her normal amount that she needs. We have 2/3 cup of sugar, and we will divide by 2 because she makes 1 dozen and this is 2 dozen. Okay, great, but how are we ever going to solve this problem? Oh, yeah, flip it and multiply. Okay, cool. So we keep our 2/3 the same, flip this 2 over 1 to be a 1 over 2, and multiply. Multiply across. 2 times 1 is 2, 3 times 2 is 6. This reduces because they are both divisible by 2. So 2 divided by 2 is 1, 6 divided by 2 is 3, and you get ta-da, 1/3. Now some of you are saying, yes, Miss Van Dyke, but couldn't we just said, hey, what's 1/2 of 2/3? And 1/2 of 2/3 is just 1/3. Well, yes. Good. And now you know why it works. Would you say 1/3 cups or 1/3 of a cup? They're both right, but what? I wonder what you guys would say. If only there were a way to take a poll. Okay, anyway. Now, finally, we're going to simplify some expressions, evaluating for what happens if x is 4/5. So the 2 steps here is we need to substitute it. That is, plug it in. And then after we substitute, we simplify. Okay? I guess I could have just moved this here. Evaluate means to substitute and then to simplify. Okay, so we're going to take wherever we have x and we'll replace that with a 4/5. So here we have 4/5 over 3. Ew, well, that's the same thing as 4/5 divided by 3. So that's nice because divide by 3, divide by 3. I should have used a different color. Divide by 3, divide by 3. Okay, cool beans. Now remember, we don't like to divide. We instead multiply. We flip it and multiply. So we flip this 3 over 1 to be a 1/3 and multiply. 4 times 1 is 4, 5 times 3 is 15, and although it looks like it can be reduced, it can't. So there you go, we got 4/15. And finally, for our last problem of the notes, substitute. So we've got 5 divided by 6 times 4/5. Wow, that's a lot to take in, but that's okay. We're going to figure it out. So that's the same thing as 5 over, well, 6 is the same as 6 over 1 times 4 over 5. And we can simplify this denominator a bit. We're going to do that by multiplying across. So 6 times 4 is 24. 1 times 5 is 5. That's nice. And now we can rewrite this whole thing as a division problem, because it is a division problem. Because whenever we have divided by, or a number over something, that's the same thing as dividing by it. So that's the same thing as 5 divided by 24/5. 5 divided by 24/5 is the same thing as 5 divided by 24/5. Sweet. But we don't like dividing by fractions, do we? Instead, what are we going to do? You flip it and multiply. So that's 5 over 1 times 5/24 and multiply across. 5 times 5 is 25. 1 times 24 is 24. I like to leave fractions like this. If you would rather say a mixed fraction, that's 1 and 1/24, that's also totally fine. Okay, the 2 steps to dividing with fractions, it's not these guys. How do we divide by fractions? Oh, flip it and multiply. Amazing. Have a fantastic time on your homework.